All right, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Everybody's hanging in there, huh?
Introduce yourself.
My name's Matt McCoy. Let's see, introduce myself. I'm over at Life University, among some other things. I do some research, edit some research journals, have a malpractice insurance company, been involved in politics in the profession for a while, so I guess that's kind of a good introduction in terms of where I'm coming from with this topic. Charles invited me to do this. I appreciate it. Very nice of him to invite me here to do this. I kind of feel like Al Gore at times with the message that I try to bring to the chiropractic profession. A little bit of a disclaimer, you know, when we get into this. Typically when I do this talk, it's 6 hours. 4 hours I can do, and then Charles gave me 20 minutes. So you guys will have to let me know if I accomplish what I need to accomplish in 4 hours and 20 minutes. And then if I do that, that's great, because from now on it's a 20-minute lecture. So let me talk about this first. In my estimation, it's my contention that we've got a perfect storm brewing right now, and that perfect storm is occurring outside and inside the profession, okay? We know there's a crisis in healthcare. There's also a crisis within the chiropractic profession, okay? And I'm gonna outline this very briefly here. Most of you guys are aware enough to know what's going on in healthcare in terms of the crisis. But in summary format, we've got, 80 million baby boomers right now that are entering into the Medicare market and are going to be taking advantage of that, and our tax dollars related to that. We have the issues of Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid insolvency, right? Didn't they just lower the year in which Medicare is going to become insolvent again? So now it's closer to us than we thought last year, when they just crunched the numbers. We have this notion of paying for health care for everybody and how that is going to tax the system. Health care is going to be 25% of the gross domestic product of the country very soon. I don't know a lot about economics, but I know enough about economics to know that that's unsustainable, and that's what all the economists say, that there's no way to sustain it. We're going to be paying $25,000 for a family of 4 for health insurance pretty soon. And then we have this issue of accountability. And that's where the research piece comes in. No matter who you talk to in healthcare, health policy, health economic experts, they all say the same thing when it comes to how to solve the healthcare problem. Nobody's in disagreement about this, which is pretty bizarre when you think about it. And the only way to solve the healthcare problem is to stop paying for what doesn't work. Everybody agrees on that. There's a lot of stuff we don't agree on, but everybody agrees that we can't pay for things that don't work anymore. So this accountability piece is key. This accountability piece is happening outside the profession, but it's also going to affect our profession. There's no question about that. Within our profession, the perfect storm within our profession that we're dealing with is currently a 40% decline in chiropractic college enrollment. So we have 40% less students in chiropractic colleges right now. We're getting to a point where the numbers going in and coming out are not equaling the numbers leaving. So that's a serious situation for our profession. We have a situation where the majority of chiropractors in practice right now have been practicing for less than 10 years. I've sat here and listened for the past several hours from some people who have been around a long time in this profession. We're losing those people. We're losing those people. We're losing people that went to jail for chiropractic. I don't know if there's anybody still alive that actually went to jail for chiropractic, which is scary to me. Having grown up in the profession and sort of being immersed in the profession since I was a kid, it's interesting to me to be in a chiropractic college and be around students who are in second, third quarter who have never been to a chiropractor. Yet they're making a decision about becoming a chiropractor because it's a career choice now. It used to be you became a chiropractor because of a personal experience, or you grew up in a chiropractic family, or something of that nature. Now we have people, oh, I'll be an accountant, I'll be a dentist, I'll be a medical doctor, oh, I'll be a chiropractor. Okay? I go to school for 6 years, get $200,000 in debt, and they'll call me a doctor, right? And what I see happening is I talk to people out in the field, certainly being involved in the stuff I'm involved in, when they get out there and realize some of the baggage our profession has, they wonder whether or not they made the right decision. So we have this issue of the career choice. We also have the issue of a decreasing market share. It used to be we talked about 10% of the population see chiropractors. The most recent numbers from the government say 3.4%. So it's down from 10. If you follow the literature, you can see it going from 10% to 7% to 6% to 5% to the latest numbers, 3.4% market share. So we have a decrease in the market share. We have what some would call more competitors in terms of the DOs, the PTs, and other people getting into manipulation. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, they're really not competition for us depending upon what we're doing as chiropractors. Okay? And it's been a pleasure to be in a room talking about research where the S word is not a dirty word. So I certainly appreciate that. Because if that's what we're focused on, then we don't necessarily have to worry about competition because that's not necessarily what they're doing. Okay? And then there's this issue of nothing unique to offer. And there should be a question mark at the end here. Do we have something unique to offer compared to these other providers? Right? It's hard for me to wrap my head around a chiropractic college student or a prospective chiropractic college student saying, all right, let me get $200,000 in debt. And for those of you that don't know this, that's the debt that a chiropractic college student graduates with now, $200,000. So let me get $200,000 in debt. Let me spend 8 years in school. Let me spend another $50,000 or $100,000 to get set up in practice, get licensed, get through part 4, get through 4 parts of national boards, and jump through all those hoops, right? And then get out into practice and teach people how to diet, exercise, eat right, and sleep right. You can do that as a high school dropout with no education, no diploma, no license, and no debt, right? What is the uniqueness that our profession has to offer? My contention is that uniqueness resides in the S word, in the subluxation, that many people have been talking about today. And that all ties into the wellness industry, which is at this point $1 trillion industry, and anybody can pretty much get into it, right? Personal trainers, multi-level marketing, things of that nature. So it speaks to this issue of the decline in chiropractic college enrollment that we're seeing. So we have this perfect storm outside the profession, perfect storm within the profession, okay? Bear with me on this. There's a lot of words on this, but this is really important because it goes to the crux of the point I'm trying to get across here, okay? So this was published in Dynamic Chiropractic back in 2005. You can see the usual suspects here that were involved in the statement. Some may suggest that chiropractors should promote themselves as the experts in correcting vertebral subluxation. However, the scientific literature has failed to demonstrate the very existence of the subluxation. Until and unless sound research published in credible journals demonstrates the existence and reliable identification of vertebral subluxation, and it's found to be an important public health problem, society at large won't care about its correction. Thus, subluxation correction alone is not a viable option for chiropractic's future. A couple of things, okay? I'm all about dealing with reality. In order to solve a problem, we got to identify the problem, we got to know the obstacles getting in our way, okay? So if we were to break this statement down a little bit, the first one here, I just call the silliness argument, okay? That the existence, that there is no such thing as a subluxation. I mean, we hear that we're actually still having this ridiculous conversation. That there's people within our profession, people that control this profession, that say subluxations don't exist, okay? I was doing a 15-hour weekend-long seminar back in the mid-90s on subluxation, and it takes 15 hours to go through all the literature to talk about the existence of vertebral subluxation. So we have to just agree within this group for the rest of this discussion that let's just agree that it exists so we can get on to talking about the real issues, okay? So what's the answer? The answer, and again, can't get into a lot of detail, especially with the marketing piece, but in my opinion, the answer is research. This is the accountability piece. We're going to have to show that we can beat them in the marketplace, and the way we're going to be able to show them we can beat them in the marketplace is through research, because otherwise we're not going to have that accountability piece. But the research alone isn't going to save us, because then we've got to have a marketing piece of this to get the results of that research out to the public, to drive the masses into chiropractors' offices. My contention is this notion of one spine at a time, that can build a practice. And you can have a nice life and a nice retirement, one spine at a time. But one spine at a time is not going to save the chiropractic profession. There's no question about that, because there's not enough time. There's only about 15 or 20 years before this perfect storm and the proverbial feces hits the fan before we run out of time on this, okay? So, that brings us to my thesis regarding what our research agenda needs to consist of, or at least the basis of our research agenda needs to consist of. And when we ask these questions, these are a series of what I call the so what questions, all right? Because every time you answer the question in the affirmative, the next question from our detractors, the next question from the people that are going to be holding us accountable is, yeah, so what, all right? So the first aspect of this is, if subluxations exist, so we're going to agree that they exist, what evidence do we have that we can objectively identify them using valid and reliable means? Okay? This issue of validity and reliability is key when it comes to research. I mean, we sat through a whole section of presentations here on occipital fiber analysis, right? I mean, we've got actually people doing some research on the validity and reliability of occipital fiber analysis. That is extremely important, that that kind of work is being done and that that kind of work gets into the literature. Because if the means by which we're identifying subluxations are not valid and reliable, it doesn't matter, right? Because then it's just anecdotal, it's just our opinion, and it ain't going to make it into the accountability piece, all right? So that's the first issue. So let's say we do have these valid and reliable means. The next question is, so what? So you've identified something using some valid and reliable means. Who cares? If subluxations exist and can be identified, what evidence do we have that their existence leads to adverse health outcomes? Because just because you have a subluxation doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. You've got to have some evidence that that subluxation, or the existence of that entity, is tied to some bad health outcome. Now, I've got something here in parentheses. In fact, Marty and I were actually talking about this on one of the breaks just now, right? Because we have people in our profession who believe that the purpose of chiropractic is to unite man, the physical, with God, the spiritual. Yes? Right? I don't really have anything wrong with that. I don't have any problem with that, okay? Except to say, show me your outcomes. Because if you're telling your patients that they're going to be closer to God as a result of your care, you better have some evidence that they're closer to God at the end of the care. And that is possible to do. There are health-related quality of life questionnaires that measure spirituality and components of spirituality and whether or not people are more connected to a higher being. So you can measure that. So there's no excuse, no matter what spectrum of the profession you're on, relative to chiropractic in this topic, okay? But the next question is, if we can show that subluxation leads to adverse health outcomes, so what? Do we have some evidence that their existence leads to adverse health outcomes? What evidence do we have that we can actually correct subluxations? So we do our magic on them, right? We find this subluxation in somebody, we do our thing, and then afterwards, is that subluxation reduced? I mean, this is really key here. Because if we did something to them, we found a subluxation, we found a misalignment component, we found a neurological component, and we did something to them. But after we did something to them, those components are still there, then it didn't matter what we did, right? It goes back to what BJ said, then we could just hit them in the ass with a shovel and they're going to get better. We're firing off mechanoreceptors, and what's the point of worrying about the characterization or the quality of the subluxation in that patient if we don't have any evidence that it's been reduced? So this is a key piece here. And if we have evidence that we can correct them, what evidence do we have that correcting them leads to improved health outcomes? All right? So we got to show that they exist. We got to have valid and reliable means to identify them. We have to show that they lead to adverse health outcomes. We have to show we can correct them, and we have to show that that correction leads to some improvement in health outcomes. Otherwise, nobody's going to want to pay for this stuff, including the consumer, right? You guys have all been around long enough. I think you know what the big idea is, right? And this, for me, is where it gets real interesting. Because I look at the history of this profession over the past 40 or 50 years, and I look at where the leadership, especially the leadership relative to research, has taken us when it comes to research, right? Neck pain, back pain, headaches, that's what we've got after, 100 years of being around as a profession. What if we had taken a different route 40 or 50 or 60 years ago, right? The big idea is that old BJ story about the slip on the sidewalk. People kind of familiar with that? That if Charles is subluxated, he affects everybody in this room. It's kind of a metaphysical concept, right? Sometimes people think it's too spiritual, religious, or something like that, right? And if his subluxations are corrected, that helps everybody in this room. And in fact, if he's subluxated, he affects people states away, countries away, on the other side of the planet, right? Really crazy stuff. You're affecting a lot of people, right?
I'm going to go get cheese after this.
Here's the thing, though. People outside of our profession are proving the big idea, right? And not even necessarily related to chiropractic. Christakis is the most well-known for this. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. The spread of obesity in a large social network over 32 years. A couple of things that are significant about this study. First of all, the length of the study, 32 years. Size of the study, 12,000 people in the study. Big study. What'd they find? They found that if you hang around with people who are obese in your social network, guess what? You're probably going to be obese too. I mean, that, as Homer Simpson would say, right? Duh. Here's the thing that's profound about it. You don't have to know these people. You don't ever have to have any interaction with them. They can be on the other side of the planet, right? It's the big idea. Why are we able to study this kind of stuff? Because of the age of the internet, because of the ability to manipulate large databases, and because of advanced statistical methods. What this means is that the technical means to study the fundamental tenets of our profession exists. The technical means are there. There's absolutely no excuse anymore for not studying it. It's the will of the profession that's lacking. It's a lack of interest by our profession to put our resources into research to uncover this stuff. That's what's lacking at this point. Got a bunch of people from the ICPA here this weekend. Marty's here, Kevorkian's here, right? Here's a good example of the kind of stuff I'm talking about when it comes to research in chiropractic. Let's look at the title of this. Examination of periodontal treatment, dental care, and pregnancy outcomes in an insured population in the United States. They looked at 23,000 women, okay? 23,000 women. What were their conclusions? We'll just jump right to that rather than talking about all this stuff. For women with medical and dental insurance, preventive care is associated with a lower incidence of adverse birth outcomes. We have nothing in our profession where we can make that kind of a statement, but the dentists do. So ethically and morally, if you're looking at the research, you got to say, look, if you're pregnant, you need to go to a dentist, because you're going to have better health outcomes than if you don't. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to have to really embrace and wrap our heads around if we're going to be on the good end of that accountability issue that we're talking about with healthcare. So what can you do? Charles wanted me to talk a little bit about what you can do. You can support chiropractic research. Hopefully you're going to support chiropractic research that's consistent with your values. If you think we need more back pain, neck pain, headache research, then you should write your checks to that aspect of the profession that is doing that for you, and that's who you should support, okay? If you think that there's some other thing that you'd like to see researched and studied in the profession, then you should be writing your checks to those people, okay? It's a moral crime to support your own destruction. Don't forget that. So that's the money piece. You can do research yourself. You can do case studies in your office. I mean, how many case studies do we hear just this afternoon in 4 hours? Okay. You can do case studies in your office. They're simple to do. You can do case series in your office. You can gather a whole bunch of cases and compile them and do a case series. You can do retrospective studies. You can go back in your office on all your patients. You've been in practice 30 years. Guess what? You got 30 years worth of gold, right? Acres of diamonds sitting right there in your office that you can go back through and you can mine and you can get it into the literature. You can do prospective studies. You can do, we're doing this in my wife's office. We went back the past 12 years retrospectively and took all of her outcomes with her pregnant patients and her pediatric patients. So we have all the retrospective data. And then we started a prospective pregnancy and children's study so that from now on, we're gathering all of the pregnancy and pediatric data in our office. Not only is she able to use that just internally for marketing and things like that, but we're going to be able to publish this stuff, okay? And hopefully be able to bring other offices into this and gather their data as well. So case studies, case series, retrospective studies, prospective studies, these are all things you can do. The most important thing I think you can do, though, is we've got to look at these bigger issues, because that research agenda I laid out isn't going to happen just in your office. Right? We need 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 chiropractors' offices that are gathering data on a large scale so that we can have tens of thousands of subjects in a long-term observational health outcome study of the effects of chiropractic care on health outcomes. And that's essentially what we're going to need in the next 10 or 15 years if we're going to be ahead of the curve on this accountability issue. And I'm not taking any questions now, right? So, questions later. If you do have questions throughout the weekend, my managing editor of my research journal is going to be here outside in the booth all weekend. Stop by and ask her. We're happy to help you with anything you want to do relative to doing research in your office, publishing all these papers that have been presented. Hopefully you guys are all going to do something with these papers beyond just the proceedings that they're being published in, and we're happy to help you with that. So, thank you. All right, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Everybody's hanging in there, huh? My name is Matt McCoy. Let's see, introduce myself. I'm over at Life University, among some other things. I do some research, edit some research journals, have a malpractice insurance company, been involved in politics in the profession for a while, so I guess that's kind of a good introduction in terms of where I'm coming from with this topic. Charles invited me to do this. I appreciate it. Very nice of him to invite me here to do this. I kind of feel like Al Gore at times, the year in which Medicare is going to become insolvent again. So now it's closer to us than we thought last year when they just crunched the numbers. We have this notion of paying for health care for everybody and how that is going to tax the system. Healthcare is going to be 25% of the gross domestic product of the country very soon. I don't know a lot about economics, but I know enough about economics to know that that's unsustainable, and that's what all the economists say, that there's no way to sustain it. We're going to be paying $25,000 for a family of 4 for health insurance pretty soon, and then we have this issue of accountability, and that's where the research piece comes in. No matter who you talk to, with the message that I try to bring to the chiropractic profession. A little bit of a disclaimer, you know, when we get into this. Typically when I do this talk, it's 6 hours. 4 hours I can do, and then Charles gave me 20 minutes. So you guys will have to let me know if I accomplish what I need to accomplish in 4 hours and 20 minutes. And then if I do that, that's great, because from now on it's a 20-minute lecture. So let me talk about this first. In my estimation, it's my contention that we've got a perfect in healthcare, health policy, health economic experts. They all say the same thing when it comes to how to solve the healthcare problem. Nobody's in disagreement about this, which is pretty bizarre when you think about it. And the only way to solve the healthcare problem is to stop paying for what doesn't work. Everybody agrees on that. There's a lot of stuff we don't agree on, but everybody agrees that we can't pay for things that don't work anymore. So this accountability piece is key. This accountability piece is happening outside the profession, but it's also going to affect our profession. There's no question about that. Within our profession, the perfect storm within our profession that we're dealing with is currently a 40% decline storm brewing right now. And that perfect storm is occurring outside and inside the profession, okay? We know there's a crisis in healthcare. There's also a crisis within the chiropractic profession, okay? And I'm gonna outline this very briefly here. Most of you guys are aware enough to know what's going on in healthcare in terms of the crisis. But in summary format, we've got, what, 80 million baby boomers right now that are entering into the Medicare market and are going to be taking advantage of that, and our tax dollars related to that. We have the issues of Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid insolvency, right? Didn't they just lower